Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Office Us at iZooto. And today we have with us Michael Bertini. Hello, Michael.
Hi, Vivek. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really
Yeah, thanks
excited
for
about
having
the
me.
conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Likewise.
So so Michael, I know I will do a bad job at introducing you. Why don't you give us? I know, and you've had a long, illustrious career in SEO. You've done pretty much everything under the sun uh, when it comes to SEO. Why don't you give us a quick 1 minute intro of about yourself? Yeah.
Sure. Well, you guys already know my name. I've been in the industry well over a decade. I worked a lot of my career as a consultant. I've consulted for a large portion of the brands on the Fortune 500 list, a large portion of the brands on the Fortune 100 list. I started my career off as a black hat SEO, if you will. Obviously, I no longer do that anymore. That industry went down quite some time ago. Obviously, there are people who dabble in it, but yeah, whole nother story. These days, I work at an agency I was consulting for and decided to bring me on full time. I work largely with enterprise businesses these days, specifically in financial services related. So think of the large banks. I also work with some large media publications in financial services and a few other niches. I've done quite a bit of everything in SEO. My forte and what I have, I guess you could say some recognition in, is technical SEO and link building.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's a little bit about myself. Oh, I live in Central Florida. I have 3 kids and obviously my wife. We've been together since we've been 16 years old. So,
Wow, 16 years old, which means
yeah.
a long time.
Yeah. So we make 16 years this year. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing,
Yeah.
amazing, amazing. Awesome. All right. So Michael, we'll just deep dive because this topic is so exciting for me personally and for a lot of people on the call right now as well. Right. SEO is SEO thankfully now, SEO 10 years back, SEO 15 years back, and SEO today. They are very, very different things. Right? What is not changes, SEO means Google search. There is no SEO for Bing search or some other search engine for sure. Right? One, what is does the meaning of SEO change when the size of business changes? For a website which has 100 pages, let's say, to a website which has 1,000 pages, to a website which has like 1,000,000 pages. Right? Do we have a change in context?
There's a little bit. So if you have, to give an example, if you have your small business, let's say you're a local plumber or you just a mom and pop, restaurant, right? You're probably, let's say, looking at 10, 15, 20 pages, right?
Yeah.
At best.
Yeah.
And let's say you're one of those sites that you harness your SEO and you're building a lot of mid-funnel and upper funnel content. You're still, once again, you're under that 100-page mark, right? Your SEO can be handled through plugins. There's great WordPress plugins out there. There's great Magento plugins out there if you're a small e-commerce website. Everything is typically handled through more plugins, and it's easier to manage. When you start getting into, let's say, you're a smaller e-commerce website with 10,000 SKUs, immediately your SEO changes. Conceptually, as far as like content creation and speed and performance, those are going to always remain, right? But the way that you build your business is going to be treated differently, because instead of building links, let's say, to set pages, you're building links, categorically speaking, to category pages to elevate those, right? Because nobody has the budget to build links to 10,000 pages, right?
Yeah.
It's not, especially when it's not through like press, right? It's not.
Yeah.
And then when you think of, let's say you're a large publication, right? So I have a client of mine, they're probably one of the largest financial publications, globally speaking. They have, I want to say 20 million pages. So SEO, exactly. It's dramatically different. And the reason I say it's dramatically different is because automation then becomes the key, right? And so people typically say you don't want to automate as much as possible in SEO. You want to keep things manual. When you're doing SEO at a level where you're talking 20 million plus pages, everything needs to be driven by templates. Everything needs to be driven by programs, API calls. I mean, everything is done at a broad level versus at this like smaller, like if you were to open up, you just say a mom and pop shop.
Got it. Right. And how does this change very, very specifically in the media context? I've seen e-commerce stores with 100,000 SKUs, right? 500,000 SKUs if you are like really big, But when it comes to media, we're talking about like 1,000 pages published every day, like this. In the financial world, data comes every single second potentially is a page moment up there, right? And clearly, right? And this is a standard situation for media business across the globe. No matter whether you are in SF, Delhi, Manila, or Japan, you will be publishing insane amount of content on a daily basis, right? Some of it will be coming from your own editors, from feeds, and God knows what, right? What happens then, right? How do you start thinking about the strategy from ground zero?
Yeah, from ground zero, the first thing I want to do is figure out when you're a large media site, figure out who's your demographic that you're targeting, right? Because one would say, well, a media site could probably cover all. There's a reason why there's several media sites. People have biases, people have different views on stuff, right? And so I'd figure out who's my demographic, my target demographic, and then figure out the psychographic, the people who like, how are those people thinking? Like, are they young? Are they people in their, from 19, to 25? Are they in college, right? They consume content very differently than, say my uncle, at 65 years old, just kind of getting used to computers right now, like, or somebody even in banking, right? A big stockbroker. You'd think like they're fully, consuming like large portions of content, and they're really not. They're looking at very small bits of information and call out. So I would figure that out first. And obviously that's something that you figure out with the media site as from the business perspective. And then that kind of helps me get into keyword theming. Now, this is where I say that traditional SEO or like SEO for a smaller site is going to be very different than SEO at the, a media site, is because you're not thinking at a keyword level at all. Because, and you really can't. You have to think as broad as you can possibly get, because topics are constantly changing. Topics are, different topics trend. So you have to think as high up as possible. So typically what we'll do is we'll start from obviously homepage, building out site architecture. And then we're going to look at what are the main categories that you're looking to talk about? Is it business finance? Is it personal finance? Is it lifestyle related, news, right? Are you pushing out tickers, like index fund tickers and stuff like that? So really trying to hone in on what are like your main categories, and then we'll go down sub theme from those categories. But from there, you get into upper funnel content, right? You're talking, everything is topic related. So really once you pass that sub theme level, so you have your main topic, then you have your subtopic, then you get into your very mid-funnel, upper funnel content, which everything at that point is handled on a template basis. You're giving them a template that says your H1s need to be these kind of things. Your title needs to be this. Your meta descriptions need to be this. That all needs to be populated, right? Your images need to be compressed. They need to, be worded this way. Like, it's very templatized. So you're more working with the teams internally to templatize these things. But if you're like an SEO and your assumption is that you're just going to go in and do normal SEO like you do for any other client, like, hey, change this H1 or, reduce your character length on this title tag. Like you've hired the wrong SEO for that. Like they're clearly not at that level. As an SEO at that level, you're more of a team member. You're an extension of their internal teams. Oh, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I was mute. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
So you know what? Actually, interesting point because you mentioned that you're involved right at the site architecture level, which is pretty much the core product. In case of publisher, the website is your product, right? So yeah, we get interesting sort of approach of so you're saying templates, automation, figure out the best templates, right? So by the way, what are the most important sort of component of those templates, right? How is let's just say if you can outline 3 best practices, right? What would you say?
Number one, especially with a media site, and this is probably, when I mean number one, I mean this could literally take up 1, 2, and 3, all the same, is site speed. Okay. Media sites, historically speaking, it wasn't a thing. It was like once the internet hit, a media, let's say media site, and I'll reference one of my clients that I consulted for, but large financial, media site, like I said, probably the largest globally, launched a website, back in, I think 99, kind of, just to get out there on the web, go from print to web, updated their site in 2004, did a refresh in 2012, and then it's been the same since, kind of thing, right? That's horrible. Like it's always been like the website is on this back burner, and typically with media sites, and I've noticed this, and it's a very bad habit for media sites, is that the C-suite is more of like, if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of thing, and the internet doesn't work that way. Like that's a very, like that worked when like my grandma was telling me like not to touch the fan, right? Like don't mess with my fan. It's been working. It's not broke. Don't start messing with it. I don't even want it cleaned, right? Like they're so superstitious. Like don't even clean my fan because it might break something. That's not how you treat the internet these days. Google, and I know we talked, brought it up a little bit about Google algorithm updates, but Google changes so damn much that it's like you can't, and so does technology. Like you can't have this idea of like, well, it's good for now, let's just leave it. That doesn't work anymore. Like you have to get ahead of the curve. Speed by far is the biggest component of that, is speed, and obviously user experience will kind of tie into that. But that'd be the biggest one. The other thing that I see absolutely, I want to say butchered, is site architecture. And as much as I love to put site architecture as number one, I just know speed is just so bad for a lot of these websites that it has to keep that number one field. But site architecture definitely comes in a close second. I still see news sites or media sites with parametered URLs and, question mark, dot, exclamation point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like in the URL. It's like, how does that even happen in 2020? And these are large media sites. Like I'm not speaking about just somebody who like randomly throws up a media site. I mean like India Times, somebody that big. I've seen like URL architecture, issues. Right. And so, yeah, I would say that's number 2. And then the other thing, man, if I were to add like a 3 to that, is keeping up with technology. Media sites, I have a few of my clients who were ahead of the curve, meaning they took a recommendation that I had several years ago before it was popular. AMP being that recommendation. I remember being in a meeting and being mocked. People thought it was an absolute silly thing. And they're like, AMP is going to be the next Google Plus, like failure. It's going to end up in Google graveyard, right? Of products. And I'm like, I don't really think so. Like anything speed related is here to stay. And I remember being mocked,
That did not age well.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And,
Yeah.
and funny, I have two of my clients, large media sites who went ahead and did it. And they're probably one of the top performers with AMP now. And now you have to think like you have the ability to get in the stories. That's the only way you're getting into stories, right? You have to have AMP related content.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, forget about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Exactly. And when you think of like our generation or even Gen Z, millennial, I want to say even up to, I think some of the data that we found was like up to like 55 years old, people are going to stories. That's where they're going. If they're on a mobile device, it's just where they're going to go. And so you don't have AMP, you're not there. But once again, kind of getting back to that whole third point is like, you got to keep up with technology. Like if they announce something and you see that there's a big wave of, developers getting involved, like you have to have your marketing teams staying up to date with how the system is changing. Like that should be your marketing director's job, should be that.
I have like a bunch of questions in my head right now. I want to double click on the one which says so it's not, so the modern age SEO guy in 2020 is not just about SEO. It's about UX, it's about site architecture, it's about speed. This is a blown marketing job. It's not an SEO job. SEO is a very small, the classic definition of SEO, H1 meta, title, description. That's like just hygiene probably now. It's like, do not have a HTTP website. Please secure your damn website, for God's sake.
Exactly.
So we're not talking basics now. Yeah.
At all. My hiring choices, and somebody's presented to me this, especially as a consultant, when I'd go in and consult with brands on like building in-house SEO teams, they're always looking for, and even most recently, I just recently hired an SEO to take on a very big account. But when I consult with these brands, people always question my hiring decision because people assume that I'm going to look for the guy with 10 years experience in SEO, right? Or even 5 years experience in SEO. They assume that that's my go-to, and my go-to is always a developer as my bottom line, because I can bring in a developer, teach that developer how to do SEO. And sure, they won't have the experience of a veteran SEO, meaning they won't have, they haven't been around for so many years to have seen what works and what doesn't work and what fails and what doesn't fails, and know how, Google, bullshits, or excuse me, BS's us, right? With a lot of stuff, right? They say one thing and then they do something completely different. They might not have been around for that, but you can take that developer who knows the more difficult skill and teach them SEO, right? Same thing with link builders. When I hire link builders, I hire PR people. I don't hire link builders.
Yeah.
Link builders, in my mind, a lot of them, unless I know them and they're on like in my phone contact list, I'm not hiring a link builder. I'm hiring a PR person who I can teach link building to and get them up to, because they already know the basic principle of outreach. They just they haven't put 2 and 2 together yet. They don't know SEO.
Yeah, that's it.
But 100%, like I think when people refer to me, and I'm very fortunate, I take the compliments, but like when people introduce me or refer to me as like some great SEO, like a lot of the old school, like really veteran SEOs who built a business on their name know this. Like we had to learn programming a long time ago because SEO just didn't cut it, right? Like you had to learn these things. Content. I sucked at writing content when I started SEO. I hated it. It was the worst. But then I had to learn how to be grammatically correct, and I had to learn how to write things into my copy, right? Like even design, like image compare. I mean, there's just so much that now the SEO has to be maybe not a master of every single aspect, but they have to have a plethora of knowledge to say, I understand how this functions and I can consult with you on that.
So the benchmark has definitely gone up.
Oh yeah, it's much more difficult to, and look, in my opinion, Vivek, I get resumes from people with master's degrees in computer science and, from I don't want to call out the school, but a very Ivy League school, because this person, if they watch this, they'll know, if it circulates the web, they'll know who I'm referring to. But I get a resume from like these very, very prestigious schools and, you know, tons of years experience in SEO. And then I get on the phone with them and I ask them, I'm like, you know, so if you had you know, to recommend something to a client as far as, let's say going from being on client side rendering or server side rendering, which would you go with? And it's like, well, you know, technical is really not my forte. And it's like, man, you're doing a disjustice to everybody. And these are very senior people. Doing a disjustice to your team who follow you, who look to you as a mentor, as a guider, right? As a coach, to not know these things. Like, and so unfortunately the hiring, I mean, it's such a flooded field these days, but I don't even look at the years experience anymore. I really look for the person, and as far as like, what is their background?
Got it. Okay. So let's go back to the topic instead of, you know, so you said two words, mobile and AMP, right? I think we have, as a generation, we have passed desktop. We've passed, you know, laptops, right? We only use them to do webinars. That's it.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
AMP and SEO, right? How do they go hand in hand? Number one. Number two, mobile SEO specifically, right? How is it different? If not, how? And if yes, how? Yeah.
Yep. AMP SEO. So I'll say this: if you build a website, if you're starting from, let's say, ground zero, right? Obviously, this will kind of change if you already have a media site, but if you're building from ground zero, if you build for AMP, you will essentially be ticking off two boxes. You'd be ticking off your box of getting an AMP, right? You'd also be in the majority scenarios, you're going to be ticking off your mobile box, meaning your mobile SEO box, if you are, your site speed box, right? Because building for AMP, when you're building a page, AMP, especially when AMP launched, it's a very reduced, think of it as, well, I'm sure you know, but even audience, you know, who's listening in, AMP is a dumbed down version of a web page, right? It's the very bare minimal to launch, you know, the web page. It's like if you wanted something like very granular speaking, like a granular response, and I give you just this like big, broad, you know, response, like here it is, just take my one line answer kind of thing. It's very minimal, right? To launch a page with the very minimal aspects. So automatically, when you build a page like that, you're typically reducing modals, you're typically reducing, you know, APIs and, you know, different fancy jQueries, like drop downs and like all these, you know, fancy things that happen. Your site is probably going to be fast anyways, right? If you build for that.
Right.
When I think of the technology of AMP, I think AMP is only going to get better. Developers, I've seen an increase in AMP developers, which, by the way, when AMP started, that wasn't even a thing. Like, yeah. I don't even know what an AMP developer was. But also AMP itself, there's very little things that you can do with JavaScript normally that you can't now do in AMP. So it's constantly progressing. Yeah. So I would say it's something that that people should be putting an effort to. Now, as far as, you know, when it comes to mobile SEO, mobile SEO is different than regular desktop SEO, and in a sense, and I'll explain how is, if you're a media site, so traditionally media sites are writing, you know, these big articles, and I've even seen a downtrend in word count on pages, but you're this huge media site, you're writing tons of content, 2,000 plus words, right? Nobody, like not on a mobile device. We're not reading 2,000, like that's like 10 minutes of scrolling, 2,000 words, right? So that's how it differs. It is really like usability, user experience. As far as the SEO in general, site speed is more of the critical thing. But if you're comparing apples to apples, the reason why Google went mobile first indexing is because there's people who have certain content that's viewable on mobile that's dumbed down, but they're taking advantage of their desktop rankings, which is keyword rich, tons of content, constantly, putting content in different keyword things and title and header tags and stuff. So I would say from that aspect, it is different. Now, if you're a media site, right? If I owned a media site, and what I tell my clients is you should build for mobile. Do not build for desktop. If you build for mobile, you will future-proof yourself for any potential algorithm updates that can come if you build for mobile. If you build for desktop and then think you're going to create a mobile version of that, it's going to be very difficult. You're wasting a lot of good money.
So I get that, right? If you're building today, build for mobile, number one, sure, right? Would you sort of also say that the mobile architecture would look differently for media sites as compared to the architecture on desktop? Right? What sort of changes, because now people already have a desktop site and a mobile site. They've already done AMP, they've already done the basics, right? Now they're sort of just trying to optimize on the user experience. Right?
Yeah.
Like what are the incremental steps? Because with your media site, you're looking at hundreds of initiatives, each of which brings in a 1% delta.
Yep.
Right. So what would be those picks after the AMP game is done? I know I have my AMP stories coming in, swipe right, whatever. It looks cool and stuff. But then what next? What else do I have?
Yeah. So I would say that if you're as far as bite size, right? And typically what I recommend is taking off, think of every category as a business unit in itself, or even every subcategory, depending on how many categories and subcategories you have. Think of it as a business unit itself. And so we would take a small portion, and obviously a small portion with a large media site is actually still a very big portion for most people. But you take a very small portion, a category. Let's say it's business finance, right? You take this category and you work on optimizing this section itself. Obviously, from an architecture standpoint, it's very difficult, right? Because when you get into naming convention and changing folder structure, that is a very daunting task, especially when you have millions of pages. Site architecture is probably, it's something that has to go in parallel. So I would recommend, if you are this large media site and you have a really crappy, site architecture, is like, and I mean non-SEO friendly site architecture, is something you should start working on today, but know that you're probably not going to launch this. And I'm giving realistic here because I worked through this with a client not too long ago, but you're realistically looking at, I want to say, about 14 to 16 months out to actually getting it accomplished. And if people want to know the reasoning why it takes so long, besides the fact that when you're a large media site, there's a lot of hoops you have to go through. It's redirects. It's all the redirects that you have to manage and handle. And even if you automate them, it's time consuming.
Yeah. So intense, right? From a technology point of view.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Now, I know Google has done 3 updates this year. Google did 3 updates last year, if I'm not wrong. Right? They have a funny way of naming the updates, of course. We spoke about that. But how should these sites, right, who can take a hit of anywhere between 30% to 50% at times, right? How do they prepare for this? Is there any way of preparing for this ever? Or, like a bomb will drop like COVID and, one fine day, boom, down by 30%.
Now I'll probably piss off a lot of my SEO friends, or a lot of people who follow me when I say this, but when I got into my white hat career, like the white hat portion, when I made that transition, I've had I want to say 2 clients that I could think of, probably maybe 1 or 2 more that were hit by any of these updates and really saw a significant impact. Obviously, I consult with a lot of the biggest brands in the world, and it's very, I really haven't seen that. And I'm going to explain why. And I know this is what's going to really piss off maybe some SEOs, but if you think about ultimately what Google has traditionally always looked for, right, is quality, unique content, right? Publishing in frequent cadences, right? Fast, user-friendly site, right? Like, because it's good for the user. And then press, right? People speaking about you on the web. They really haven't changed. Like that has always been Google's underlining goal. Excuse me. Have they ever been able to accomplish that? They're pretty much there now. It took them 20 plus years, right, to get to that point. But they're very close to, I don't know if it'll ever be perfect per se, but I want to say they're probably at like 75% now at this point to getting really good, having a really good user experience. Right. And so I would say if a person sticks to those core key things, they're somewhat future-proofing for any algorithm updates. I would say if you take those things, like for instance, the recency update, when Google published, or penalized publishers who weren't publishing, certain content more frequently. Yeah, I agree. I think Google was valid in doing that, because as an end user, if I Google search something like best Nike running shoes, dude, I'm not looking for something in like 2017. I'm looking for now, like today.
Now. Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. But like blogs, and I'm not going to call it any blogs because hopefully I work with some of them someday, but like large media sites who cover that kind of content, like they get pissed. They're like, oh, well, we dropped our rankings and Google hurt us. We did something negative. No, you didn't do anything negative. You just didn't build new content. So Google was valid. So that website could have avoided any loss of rank if they were to produce content within those categories, which kind of goes back to the beginning of our conversation, which is like, you have to start off with what are your primary categories and subcategories, and that's what you should optimize for. And then from a business level, where do you really want to focus your content, right? Like if it is business finance, right? If that's the market you want to do, then you have to push more business finance content. Don't spread yourself thin and start talking about like, mortgage loan refinancing just to talk about mortgage loan refinancing. Wait, stop, don't like necessarily put your content there. Focus more content and find writers. Right now, especially with COVID, there's tons of freelance writers available, like who are like, oh man, I wish a Forbes or like India Times would pick me up, right? Like, okay. I would love to be a writer on there, right, for my resume.
Yeah.
Like absolutely. Now is the time. Yeah. So now is the time, like, to do it.
Amazing. Okay. So you're saying as long as you are sticking to the core first principles, right, you would always be future-proof of these things. Perfect. Fantastic.
Foundation.
All right. Mobile is the future. We know that. AMP is picking up real fast, both in terms of adoption by businesses or by marketers and developers as well, in terms of building new things on top of AMP, right? In fact, we now work with a partner company, which was by the name of AMP for WP. They've built like some 50 extensions on WordPress for AMP, AMP for forms for AMP, ads for AMP, email for AMP. Imagine, whatever you can imagine, right? It's like Zapier for AMP, and I was amazed that such niche companies exist and are thriving incredibly, right? So okay. So we started talking about a lot of stuff, right? I want to talk about the one last thing which a lot of SEOs who are working on smaller sites obsess day in, day out. I know Venkat does, right? Is backlinking, right? Building links, both internal and external, right? Is there a strategy for that at all, really, in case of a bigger company, like a media site? Or, it's just natural PR happening automatically?
Yeah. So there is. I'll give you a white hat answer and I'll give you a gray hat. I'll give you a gray hat answer. So if people want to know, do large media sites, build links, or can they build links? They definitely do. So I know that's like mythicized, like, oh, a site like that gets millions and millions of backlinks anyways. They're not going to care for one link. They are building backlinks, not, well, or organically speaking, right? It's just different. They're building to, category pages, right? The very, L1 of a page. So you have root domain, .com/ that L1, that's where they're building the backlinks to, to strengthen the theme. As far as the link building tactics themselves, do they change? So slightly, yes. So if I'm a person in PR, the way that I would think of it is this, most PR people already have an idea of how to generate buzz. They just haven't connected the dots with SEO yet. So what I would say, if I'm this large media site and I'm looking to build backlinks and build myself up for a certain, category or subcategory page, I would be thinking along the lines of press releases, mat releases, optimized ones, not ones that you typically just generate for buzz, but optimized ones that are theme rich, like they have the themes mentioned. The other thing that I would do, and I know this kind of gets into gray hat, if you will, a little bit, or some people might say, oh, well, Google says that doesn't work, is guest blogging. So guest blogging is one of these things where traditionally, and I remember, like, I think 2010, Matt Cutts was like, guest blogging doesn't work, stop doing it, kind of thing. But if you read any articles that I've written or have been quoted in interviews, I think Google BS's us a lot of what works and what doesn't work. They say not to use the disavow, it's not, you don't really have to. Google catches most of the spammy sites. That's not true. I had black hat friends who make a living from negative SEO, techniques. So fair warning to anybody who's listening, there are black hat SEOs who get paid to tank competitor sites, right? And it still does very much work.
Wow. Okay.
But yeah, I think from a link building perspective, you should think of it more as like, if you're doing guest blogging, we have seen it work. Obviously you want to tag things appropriately so you abide by FTC and Google guidelines. But we still have seen an uptick in rankings. As far as cold outreach is concerned, which is, a lot of people, still do that method. Think of link building as more about building relationships. So you should be reaching these people through social media aspects. You should be conversing with them prior to you asking for a backlink from their website.
Amazing, how the basics of marketing don't change ever at all, no matter what function you're operating in. You could be doing SEO, paid search, Facebook, whatever, right? The fundamentals just do not change.
Never. And people always want the golden goose. They're always wanting the next best thing. And then I'll show up at a meeting and I'm like, well, really, you got to do these fundamentals, right? These things. And it's like, content is king. I will say though, Google is making a shift. So even getting into your own brand, your own company, what you guys are doing is, it's funny. I was in an interview recently. You probably look it up on LinkedIn, not too long ago, but I was talking about walled gardens.
Yeah.
So Google, and I think even as your own brand, you guys really offer something, which is that I've been pushing with some of these bigger companies, which is you need to create an environment where you're cooking your own users. users are coming to you. They're getting notified when you push content. They're getting, they know what you're doing and how you're staying up to date. Because my future prediction of Google, and this is based on everything else that Google has tried to do, Google answer box, right? Rich results. Google does not want to send people to your website. Like SEOs need to, and marketers need to get out of this thing. Like Google is here for us. Google is not here for you. Google's goal is to keep people on Google. That is Google's job. That's how Google makes money. They don't make money per se by sending people to your website. So you need to create an environment where you think about the future technologies specifically that help cookie users, that help keep users within what Google is trying to do, which is walled gardens, right? Keep users within your own realm and exactly. That's really how you need to work for the future, because if Google's not going to do that for you, and getting into paid will take paid is going to take a hit if Google doesn't give that information, that data away anymore.
Yeah. That's so true. Yeah. I mean, that's been our philosophy as well. Focus on helping brands, businesses truly own their audience, right? Without any filter, without anybody throttling their reach, right? Without new updates coming in, shopping and shaking the fundamentals of their business, right? Yeah. Let's see how this sort of goes for us. Yeah. But this has been very, very insightful, Michael. Thank you so much for taking the time. I will make one last announcement for questions. Folks, do we have any questions today? I know we sort of went right from hiring and backlinking to site architecture. We covered a lot of stuff, right? I did get a bunch of questions on LinkedIn, which I've already asked you today, right? But yes, this was very refreshing. I had no idea about some of these things which you spoke about today, right? Very, very enlightening for me personally as well, right? Yep. Okay, we have one question. Fantastic. What are some? Okay. Tell us your favorite tools that you would use for that you would recommend for large publishers.
So my go-to tools, like 90% of the time, are probably going to be Ahrefs. And this, I think, is great for media sites. People think it's just a link building tool, but I think Ahrefs is phenomenal for that. You can find out so much information with like Keyword Explorer, Site Explorer tool. My other go-to tool is SEMrush, fantastic tool. I've been a champion for them, championing their product since, for as long as they've probably been in existence. And then Moz, obviously I'm gonna push Moz tool out there. We have a proprietary product. I'll just mention it. It's Alps, which is analytics-led platform for search. It's not free to the public yet. I've gotten word that within a few weeks it will be free to the public. So it's a phenomenal tool. I know I know some people that have used this tool before. It's a great tool. But as far as other free tools, I would say would be Google Trends is a great place to look. Google Trends it makes you rely more on your expertise and knowledge, but it's a good tool to use. WooRank is another good tool to use. It's a free SEO tool. Oh, and Screaming Frog. Can't forget. Screaming Frog's another.
Screaming Frog, yes. The
Screaming Frog.
The crawling tool, yeah.
Yep. Oh, Answer the Public. That's another good one. I'm like.
I love the video. The guy.
Yeah.
The guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Answer the Public has actually been around for a very long time. People just didn't know it existed.
Yeah. I remember seeing it I think 4 years ago, 2016. 15 years when I first saw it, I was like, wow, this guy is really cool right now.
Yeah. That's a great tool.
Awesome. So I think I had one more question which completely slipped from my list right now. But you know what? I'll send it across to you. Right? I'll catch up with you again. But cool. Michael, once again, thank you so much for joining us. Lovely chatting with you.
Yes, likewise.
Take care. Stay safe. And I love that Spider-Man in the background. Right? My favorite.
Oh yeah, my Spider-Man. Yeah.
Yes, the legendary pose.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm a total nerd. So.
Right. Are you a Marvel guy or a DC guy? What are you?
People always ask. So my favorite person is Deadpool. So I have to say Marvel.
Ah,
But
I think he's the coolest.
yeah,
You know, the only one who comes halfway is probably Iron Man. Otherwise, you know, there is no cooler, you know, superhero, whatever. You know, yeah.
I'm a troll. So I'm outside of, I think maybe even in work a little bit. People that work with me might say it, but I know definitely through social media. I'm a very big troll. I like to troll people. I find it, humor for me is great, especially like I think we struggle so much with mental illness. A lot of us, we don't realize it, through daily stresses, through just life experiences and trauma and stuff. And now, thankfully, people are starting to talk more about mental illness. But for me, humor has been one of those things that adds a bright light to my life. And so I'm a very big troll. I like to make fun and stuff. And so Deadpool, I feel like even before he's been this popular, I've been following Deadpool since like way back in the day. He's a troll. He's just a glorified troll.
He is actually actually he's a horrible troll.
Yeah.
He's honestly a horrible troll. Right.
Yeah. But after him, I think my second favorite person would be Wolverine, and then third favorite would be Batman. So.
All right. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome, Michael. Thank you so much once again. Right.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's
All right.
a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
You too.